everyone, welcome to Marie's Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. This week I had to get back to the one thing that I love to make, and that is bags, any kind, but I especially love zippered bags. Now, I was going to do a tutorial on these when my channel was first around, like almost a year ago, and I just kind of put it off. And then someone had put one up on the Facebook group like a month or so ago, and I thought, oh yeah, that's right, they're these little zippered bags. So the small one, which is the size that I learned on another YouTube video, which is Jess Okla Roots, and I don't know if you've seen her channel or not, but I love her channel. She's always making bags. They're phenomenal. She's very talented. So I'm going to link her below, as well as the original video for this. I have changed it around. I've made quite a few of these and in quite a few different sizes. Now, I haven't made them overly large with this method. You do have the little tabs inside, but that's not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned in these little bags. But some of these, you can make them different sizes. So as you can see, one's a little longer than the other. There's not a whole lot to it. If you have a square of fabric that's about 7 inches, or actually under that, and then two smaller pieces for the lining, a little bit of batting, and a few minutes time, you can make one of these. Okay, so let's go do this. I'm sure you're going to have fun with these. So first things first, let's take a look at what you're going to need. You're going to need a zipper, and this is just one of the polyester zippers. There's no metal. You want it long. It doesn't need to be this long, but this was the one I had that was the correct color. So you need one piece of fabric for the outer part. Okay, this is your exterior, and it should be 5 inches by 6.5. And I will talk about changing that up here in a little bit. All right, so you've got one piece, 6.5 by 5, and then you have your lining pieces. Now your lining pieces are 3.5 by 5, so you need 2 pieces of 3.5 by 5 for the lining. You need one strip, and these are for your tabs, okay, right here. So I find it easier to cut one piece, and when we get to that, I will tell you why I feel it's better to do it this way. But I have this cut at 2 inches by about 6.5. I'm going to cut that shorter, but just to begin with, that's what we're going to start with. And then you're going to need a piece of batting. You could use Fusible fleece. I'm using just scraps of cotton batting because I have a whole bag of this stuff that's little bits and pieces. And look at how perfect that was. Couldn't get much better than that. So that's the fabric. So we will set the zipper and the fabrics aside. You're going to need, I use a size 16 needle, simply because we're going through a lot of thicknesses. You're going to need your zipper foot, a 1/4 inch foot or universal, whichever you'd rather use there. I do use a universal when I am quilting my fabric to my batting. And you will need either a key ring, a lobster clasp, a swivel hook. I'm not going to use this simply because it's too big. But just to show you guys what it looks like, I thought I would get one out. I guess I need to get varieties of these. Okay, and other than that, you're going to need an old pair of scissors because we'll be trimming our zipper. You're going to need whatever you use to cut this, as well as your threads. I use sizing on this. And the reason where I use that is on this piece, because this is going to be, like I said, our tabs. And if you give it a light spray, and I do mean a light spray, we're going to do it right now just so I can show you. It doesn't take much. You let that set for just a few seconds. You don't put your iron there right away or it will stick. And this is the last thing you're going to need is an iron. And for this small project, these little irons work out much better. I have made one, actually probably 20 of them, with my larger iron, but this just makes it easier to avoid ironing our plastic zipper because nobody wants that. Okay, so while we're right here with the iron, I'm going to fold this long piece in half. And the reason I'm using sizing is because it helps this to hold the crease. I forgot to get my clapper here. All right. So I just give that a good press. And then I'm going to fold right up next to that fold. Putting that fabric right up next to the fold. Finger press it a little bit. And then I'm going to hit it with the iron. And these little bags are so cute. And I have made them over the years in a variety of sizes. You know, I first saw the video that Jess put up and I just fell in love with that thing. I just thought it was the cutest thing ever. And I've made a lot, and I've made a lot of different sizes. You know, I'm famous, I say I'm famous for winging it. I'm always telling people, whether I'm cooking or whatever, I might tell, you know, a sibling or, you know, another family member or friend, oh, I was just winging it. Because I truly think that's how we kind of discover our creativity. We just wing it. Just do what you feel like doing. Okay, and I'm going to give this a last press. All right, so this is all set. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to do first. Oh, look at that. Nice and flat, just like we like it. I probably should have pins because I didn't mention that. You'll need pins or clips or both. You could certainly use both on this project. Wouldn't hurt a thing. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I bet you guessed it, is we're going to sew our fabric onto our batting. Oh. I don't know why it did that. Anyway, I find if I put a little bit of heat, it makes it so it doesn't need any glue or anything to hold it in place very much. So I'm just going to put 2 pins in there. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. Now you could free motion quilt. You can use some of your fancy stitches. You don't need a whole lot of quilting, but I like to quilt this down. So I'm going to put some stitches all around there. Then while I'm there at the sewing machine, I'm going to use, it's right here, I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of this on both sides. So let's go do that. I'll quilt this down, I'll stitch this, and then I'll meet you back here for the next step in our little itty bitty teeny tiny bags. Okay, I have quilted. I went a little crazy there. I did a little bit more than I had first intended. Okay, you don't need to get that particular. I just like to do that. All right, so we are going to trim this because we need it to be exactly what our measurement should be, which is 6.5 by 5. Trim this out. I usually quilt first and then trim, so I went a little backwards here. And sometimes that isn't good because, as you know, the quilting can take up a little bit of space. So do as I say, not as I do. How's that? Cut your piece just a little larger and quilt it, and then trim it to 5 by 6.5. It will all work out though. This will all be caught up in the seam allowance. No one will ever know that Marie made a boo-boo. It's not a big boo-boo. That will all get caught up in the seam. All right, we're going to lay it this way. Oh, the other thing I meant to tell you was I used a 3.0 millimeter stitch length on this. You probably can't see because it's a coordinating thread. All right, so we're going to take our zipper and we're going to place, okay, so your fabric is right side up, your exterior. Your zipper is right side down. Now I put it, depending on how long your zipper is, I put mine off to the side a little bit there. Now we're going to take a piece of lining. Now if this was a print instead of a solid, you're going to put right side down against the zipper. And what I want you to be very careful with is making sure that your sides are lined up. I'm going to turn this way so I can navigate a little easier. So I'm lining the zipper with the top of this. In fact, just for a moment, I'm going to pin that in place. If you're fairly new to zippers, I'll tell you what worked for me was just to continue to pin them where I wanted them to be so that they'd stay where I wanted. I see a lot of people use clips, and I'm sure that for them that works well. When I first started with zippers, I could have never used a clip because it just, I was taking the clip out before the sewing machine needle got to that area, so I was defeating my purpose. It wasn't holding it in place well enough for a beginner. Okay, so remember, your outer fabric is right side up, your zipper is right side down, and then your lining is right side down against the back of that zipper. So this is what it should look like. You've got your zipper sandwiched in there. Okay. Now we're going to put our zipper foot on, and we're going to back tack, sew across here, and back tack. I'm going to use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and then I'll meet you right back here. Well, that was quick. All right, so I'm going to flip that lining piece back, and I'm going to finger press that. In fact, I might just hit it with the iron. I apologize for all that sound with the cord to the iron. It's because I don't have it plugged in where I normally do. And so that's that. All right, so we're just going to make sure that this lays down nice and flat. And you don't want to get too much heat near your zipper, because remember, those are plastic, and as we know, plastic and the heat of the iron are not best friends now, are they? Okay, so we're pressing that down where we want it. And I can, whoops, excuse me, I didn't mean to get my hair in your way. It's easier if you can see where your zipper is in reference to your iron. All right. I moved my lining. I was just going to say, you want to go back and check the back again. Sometimes it shifts after or while we're working on the front. Okay, so now I'm going to use some pins because I want to make sure that this backing stays where it should be. And it just takes a couple of pins to hold that in place. And you guessed it, we're going to go over to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We're going to top stitch this. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. And I did use a 3mm stitch length when I went across there with the needle and thread. Okay, we're going to fold this so that right sides are together. Make sure you keep that nice and even on the sides. I'm going to use a couple of pins to hold this in place. Keep everything nice and even. It's a lot of layers there. Thicknesses, depending on what you've used for. All right, flip it. Now you should be looking at the lining. So again, you're going to take your lining and put it right up here against the edge. Now, if this is a printed liner that you have, if you don't have a solid, you're going to be putting right side down, okay? Or you could use a solid and it wouldn't matter. All right, I'm going to pin this in place. Removing my pins from the back that we're keeping everything even. And I'm going to take it back over to the sewing machine and sew using my zipper foot, which is basically 1/4 inch from the edge. Double check, make sure that your zipper and your exterior and your lining are all even, and give that a stitch. Make sure you back tack, stitch across, and back tack. This is just the quickest little project. I love making these anyway. They're so cute. Okay, let's open your lining like that so it's separate, and you can open your zipper a little bit if you want. But what we're going to be doing is putting our lining, and this would be right sides together because this is the interior of your little bag. I'm going to pin this. You can use clips if you like. And we're going to leave a little opening. You only need a couple of inches. You really don't need much. And I always mark my opening by putting my pins the opposite way. So now you have to be careful here. I don't want you sewing ahead. You can't play ahead here. So you're going to back tack, sew to your pin or your mark, and back tack. Leave this unsewn, don't sew this, and then back tack, sew across, back tack, and that's it. We're not going to touch the sides right now. And I guess I should have mentioned that we are definitely using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this. So you want to make sure your 1/4 inch foot or your zipper foot, whichever is handiest at the moment, is what's on the machine. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to trim my thread. So all I did was sew this from here to here, and I left this opening, and then on the other side. Okay. Now before we go any further, I'm going to bring my zipper right up close to the edge like this. See how it's right there. And I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch back and forth very close, and I do mean very close. I just need it to stay in place for just a few minutes. So I'm going to stitch a couple of times over that. All right, and this, like I said, is just to keep that zipper in place. So you can see I just went back and forth just a couple of times, okay? I'm going to open my zipper back up. You want it a little better than halfway. And I always do it. Sometimes I do it earlier. Sometimes I do it right before I need it. But either way, I want to make sure that it's done because you don't want to get to the end and you can't open your zipper. Okay, now I usually flatten that seam that we just sewed. You're going to line that up with the middle of your zipper. Okay, kind of crease this out like that, and that sewing line is even with the zipper. Then I'm going to take my top piece, and it basically is going to go where you want it to go, but just make sure that it's lined up with the sides correctly, and then pin or clip into place. I find 2 pins works just fine, 1 on each side. We're going to do the same thing with the other side. I'm going to open that seam up. Makes it easier for me anyway to see where I'm at. Line it up with the middle of my zipper. And a couple of pins. Okay, now remember that little piece we had for the tabs. Let's set this aside. All right, we have this piece of fabric here. We're going to need our handy dandy little ruler. I'm going to trim off the edges because, you know, they get a little bit thready or whatever. Okay, now I want that to be 2.5 inches long. You could go 2 if you want to. It depends on how much of a tab you want out the other side. I like to have a little bit bigger of a tab, not tag. So I cut mine at 2.5 inches. Now, I told you I would tell you why I make 1 long tab instead of 2 short ones. And that's because a lot of times when you're sewing something short like this, it's hard to get a good start so that you're even. Sometimes you just need like a leader. So you put a piece of fabric in there. In case you don't know what one is, you just take a piece of fabric. You can tell I've sewn on this. Not very much. This is a new one. But you put this under your sewing needle and you start. And then when the needle is right here, you start feeding your other pieces through. So this helps to prime, just get everything ready for your stitches. But when you use a longer piece and then cut it later, it just makes neater stitching. So if you haven't tried that before, give that a try. Now here comes the next little, it's not a trick, but it's just how I do things, all right? I want you to fold that in half. I normally don't pin these, but for the sake of filming, I'm going to. And go over to the sewing machine, and you're just going to put a couple of stitches. You could use a basting stitch. You could use any stitch you want. You're just going to hold this so that what we don't want to happen is this. Okay, you don't want this to shift to the side. You want to keep it straight. And that's why I like to stitch these tabs before they go in the bag. So I'm going to take these over and just give them a really quick sew. And I sewed very close up to the edge, probably much less than 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so now is where we're going to use our old scissors because we're going to snip off some of that extra zipper. Now, I'm going to come in later and trim more off, but for right now, I'm going to leave just a little bit peeking up over there. Okay, so you're going to take this. Oh, I forgot to say something. Goodness. See, I always say I don't edit these things out, and this is why. Okay, before you sewed this edge right here, if you were going to use a lobster clasp or whatever, you would put that in there and then sew that shut. I apologize, but I bet most of you will watch this through before you sew it. Okay, so this is the raw edge, okay? And this is the folded edge. We're going to put the folded edge in between the zipper and the outer piece. Make sure that's the side you're using. And you want to make sure that you have this lined up. You don't want it to be wonky going one way or the other. So lay it in there. I find it's helpful to put it in further than it needs to go and then slide it back. Let me see if I can show you how that looks. So you want it even with the middle of the zipper. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, the raw edge, and then we're going to open this up between the zipper and the outer fabric. Nice and lined up, just like that. I hope you can see. Right, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to back tack and sew across. Now, when I get here, if you have a machine that doesn't like bulk, you might want to go slow. I had a machine like that once and did not want to sew through anything like that. But if you do, just go slow. It will do it. But I normally go back and forth across there a little bit just to make sure that everything stays down. So, trim that out now. All right. Back tack, sew across, back tack, 1/4 inch using 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Okay, you guys have no idea what I just went through. My thread kept breaking and I couldn't figure out why. I never did figure it out. Okay, while this is flat, this is what it should look like. And it's nice and flat. I take my opening that we left right here and I just finger press that seam because we're going to be sewing that in a few minutes. Okay. Just gives it a little bit of a line that we can see. And I'm going to open my zipper up the rest of the way, or a little bit more. And we're going to push this right through that opening. I always straighten it one way, but we're going to flip it wrong side out here. I just poked my corners. Now we're going to flip it the other way. I have a little thing I use as I guess a point turner. I really do have 2 or 3 different things that turn points, but I really like this thing, so I've been less destructive with this because wowzers, I've used the tip of scissors and I've used knitting needles and had them slip and go right through my corner, which was not a good thing and I was not happy. Okay, I want to close that a little bit. Show you what I'm going to do next. If you've been watching me any length of time, you know that I love my iron. Okay, I'm going to bring that together as if it were zipped. And being careful not to melt. Don't want to melt my zipper. I'm just going to give myself, see, I want a little line here. I want something that I can see. for no other reason than that. And you basically only need it at the edges. All right. Shut that off before I forget to, because that one doesn't beep at me like my other one does. Okay, so this is what you should have at this moment. See how nice and even this opening is? Maybe I'll give that. Again, being careful because the plastic zipper. Okay, so put your fingers right inside through the opening of the zipper. Okay, and you're going to take this line and you're going to line it up with the edge of your seam. Okay, so you're going to flatten it like this so that this line that you can kind of see is lined up, like I said, with that. And I'm going to hold that with a pin so that I know it's staying in place. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. And this is why it was important to make sure your points, your corners were poked, because you don't want them to not be even. And I don't do all four at once. I guess I could for the sake of camera. Usually I do one side and then the other, but that's all right. We'll do it all at once. I just don't want to poke myself. It pretty much goes where you want it to go. It's almost as if it has a mind of its own and it knows where it has to go. And the one thing at the beginning that I forgot to tell you guys, but I will list it at the beginning, is that you're going to need a marker of sorts. You don't want one that doesn't disappear, because your marks are staying in here forever. I'm going to zoom in a bit, so hopefully you can see a little better. So what we need to do now, I'm going to show you with this. I'm going to measure 1 inch, okay? When you can measure 1 inch, so like down here is, oops, get up here. Down here, it would be more than 1 inch. You want to bring it so that it's exactly measuring 1 inch from side to side. The alternative to using one of these is to use your quilting ruler. And how I would use it, well, if I had more space to show you, I'm going to have to zoom out again. Is to put the middle line on your ruler with that point. Okay. I have the 1 inch mark, and I lined the middle up with my point. So the 1/2 inch mark is right on my point, and I've got 1 inch, and I'm going to make a line. I'm assuming you can see that. So I'm going to go along here and just make 1 inch centered on that point. It just takes a second to do it. Because this is boxing the corners. And this is what takes it from being flat into being the shape that we want it to be. Okay, so now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew on each of those lines. We're going to back tack, sew across, and back tack. And I'm going to use a 2.0 millimeter stitch length, and I'll meet you right back here. I sewed all 4. Now we're going to flip it right side out. We're going to leave those tails right on there. It doesn't hurt a thing. And then just push on all your corners. Isn't that the cutest thing ever? I made so many of these, and I've made them in so many different sizes, which is something I wanted to talk to you guys about. First off, I'm going to put my keychain on there. Of course, I've got one that I can't get open. Well, goodness. The one that I showed you here, that's longer, as you can tell. This one I cut at 6.5 by 6.5. I just do some experimenting. It's been a few years since I made up a whole lot of them, and that's, I had them in different sizes that I really liked, and I knew, I'm going to put that on later. Anyway, I open up one edge of it, and then I slide it in and on, just like I did this one. But because the camera's rolling, I can't do it. So you can make them in a lot of different sizes. I have some cut out here that I'm going to show you. So this one is cut out as normal, 5 by 6.5. And then this one is 6 by, I think 7. Yeah, 6 by 7. So you'll get different sizes depending on how you cut them out, you know, and how you want them. Just play around with the sizes and you can get any number of different things, you know. It depends on what you want to keep it in. Now this one, I'm very happy with that. I really like the size of it. Can't say I know what I'm going to put in it. But these look good. I mean, look how nice the boxed corners look. They're very neat looking. And as I showed you, when you put your tab in, those two little things will help you. Number one, stitching that tab, remembering to put on your lobster clasp if you're using one, but sewing it into place, just tacking it into place afterwards. So you're sewing it once to just kind of keep it folded correctly. And then when I put it in there, I just kind of tack it down a little bit before I go across. But I'm very happy with these. And Jess from Okla Roots, I know I mentioned her at the beginning, but the first video of hers that I ever remember of watching was this, and I was hooked because I love making bags, and that girl can sew some bags. She seriously is so talented. Yeah, you know what I did? I made another boo-boo. I forgot to top stitch the other side. See, I told you guys I don't edit out my bloopers. But just make sure that you top stitch both sides. I'll have to put something in the video to, I'll edit in some words to say top stitch now, because I forgot. But you guys forgive me, right? So the creative word of the day today is going to be mistake, because I made a couple. I apologize. But as long as you've got the general drift of how to make these, I think we're good. So I am going to close it up for now. I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. If you liked this video, please click the thumbs up. And if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. You never know what we're going to be making from one week to the next, or what we're going to be chatting about. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and until next time, you take care. Be kind out there. The world needs more of that. And I'll see you next time right here at Marie's Scrappy Creations. Bye-bye.